Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Way UK podcast. My name is Zenya. On the couch with me is
Jesse.
And today we have a very, very exciting guest with us, Aodhán King.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome
Flown in
to...
just for this.
Just for this, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Pumped to be here.
Thanks, we're excited.
It's a beautiful day.
No, it's
Ish.
not. He's lying. We live in the UK. It's grey and miserable.
Yeah.
Miserable.
I saw a little bit of sun though. That was nice.
Nice.
Just peeking through.
Just a little bit of hope to hold on to. We made you a coffee in the studio.
Yeah, and an unbelievable coffee, I might add.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shout out
I
Michelle.
haven't, this is a confession. I haven't had milk in my coffee probably for about maybe 8 years.
Whoa.
Oh,
And
gosh.
today was the first. But it's not, it's not because I have like any allergy or intolerance. I just have drifted away, and it just felt like coming home today.
Wow.
Felt like coming home.
I did, and I really liked it. It was the best coffee I've had in a long time. I think because the milk foam's better. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't mention that when it was.
No,
made for
you
me.
did.
Wow.
But we sensed it though.
You sensed
there was
it.
something wrong.
But I did pretty much finish it. I left only a tiny bit, only because it got cold.
Oh,
But I enjoyed
it's
it.
true. So
thoroughly.
it was a
Anyways,
temperature issue, not a...
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is great for us. I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
we're learning as a team.
It's good to start with honesty.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm
Love that.
glad.
Start as we mean to go on.
Yeah.
And I guess today we're going to be honest because we are getting into Aodhán's story. I tried to segue it, but
That was really good.
thanks.
You should do that more often.
That was a great
like
segue.
transitions.
Well, maybe today I'll start
That was
from
wonderful.
here on out. But yeah, we're going to be talking about Aodhán's story, how he came to know Jesus, what he's doing now in life. So yeah, let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
I feel like it'd be great to start with I guess, who are you? What do you do?
Who am I? Yeah.
What's the vibes?
I am a son of my parents. I have two brothers. My name's Aodhán King. It's spelt strange, which is Irish spelling. Grew up in Australia. Born on Christmas Day.
Wow.
I don't know how much details to give you. I have two brothers.
This is great.
Yep, that's me. That's kind of the foundation of who I am.
Are you the oldest, youngest?
Yeah.
I'm the oldest.
Wow.
Yeah, so three boys.
Power.
Yeah. Grew up in Australia. Yeah,
What part of Australia?
Sydney.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I guess with faith and stuff, did you grow up in a Christian household? What was the setting?
Yeah, I grew up I was definitely aware of Jesus. Like our family didn't go to church. I went to a Catholic school. Was there all of primary school, high school, and then kind of came to faith in my early teens. My mum's sister, so my auntie and my cousins, they all used to go to Hillsong Church. This is going back probably 2002. And they would go to Hillsong Church had these big conferences and events at the time. And I remember probably in 2002, Hillsong was doing an album recording, and it was at this arena near where I lived. So I lived in the city of Sydney, and Hillsong Church they had a campus in. Sorry, anyway, I'll get into the details. But anyways, they had this big recording, and it was I'd never heard of a church doing an event in an arena. I only knew churches in church buildings, And so I was they were like, you should just come. And I was like, all right. So I went, and that was, I knew obviously about Jesus at that point, but I went to that night and I was like, whoa, that was something that was different.
Wow.
And I was, 2002, I was 10 years old. So I didn't know what I was feeling, but I knew something was different. I think obviously now I know that was the Holy Spirit, but that was began kind of the prompting. I remember taking a CD home from that night and listening and being like, oh, this is, I didn't realize church music could be like this. I had grown up going to Catholic school, Catholic mass, and which was awesome, but very different. And so that started that. And then I think a couple of years later, I started going to the youth group, the Hillsong youth group. And I remember this is now probably 2004. I remember going into a service and just being having no musical inclination. I didn't play any instrument. I was so into sport at that point. I remember going in and being in the worship service and just being so impacted by the worship and the Holy Spirit being I don't know. I remember these feelings years earlier, but I was this is I have to be a part of what God is doing here. And that's all I knew. And so that kind of started my journey at that point, probably 2004, at Hillsong Church, and just being like, I need to, because the music was the entry point for me. I think the worship was like this like bridge in,
Right.
that I was like, whatever this is, I want to be a part of it. And I want to learn how to play music. I want to learn to do this. I want to learn to write songs, because for me, it changed my life in that moment. So I was like, okay. Anyways, we can get into that. But essentially that was my entry point. That was like the moment I kind of knew that God was real in my life. And yeah.
Wow. I guess like, because I grew up Catholic as well. So I went to like mass growing up,
okay,
like
cool.
Catholic school, like did all of it, did the sacraments, you know, we was in. And that was like great and that was fun. But I felt like for me, the crossover was, I felt like church has always been one way, you know, like especially if you're growing up, like I would go to church with my mum. So that's all I really knew. And church was always this one way thing. And so as I got older, I was like, I just don't feel like this style is for me. Like I just don't connect with God in that way. But I just thought like, so then all of church isn't for me. Do you know what I mean? Like, because this is all I know. So I'm like, well, I guess this is not cool, because this is a bit dead. And then it was only when I went to like our church, and I went to Hillsong, and I was like, oh wow, like this can be different. Like I think it's good to have an open mind with God and like allow God to, I guess, move you in different ways, and like not be so like boxed in with this is the only way worship can be, or like this is the only way church can be, and like actually go on that journey. Because I think for me, once I was able to have a more open mind, I was able to see, wow, I can really connect with God like in different ways. And it doesn't have to look like how it looks like for my mum. Like it can look like this for me. And so like, I don't know, as a young person, I guess kind of like, what would you say to young people that might kind of want to try out Jesus, but they're like, oh, I don't know if church is for me, or like, oh, I don't know about this worship thing. Like, how would you like advise someone to like approach that? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. No, totally. I mean, I resonate with that so much. I think I felt the exact same way. I think that was why, you know, I kind of fell into it. So like, I gave my whole self to it. It was because it was walking into a church that felt so different to all that I had known before. It straight away made God so much more real to me, because I was like, oh wow, God is way bigger than just this style or this way. You know, and that's not to say that there's that way of, you know, that church experience is not amazing, because I think Catholic Church and Mass and all that is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And for some people, that's exactly what they want. I agree with you. Like for me, I had limited who God could be. So I think my advice would just be more like, just be open-minded, especially when you're young. I think like there's this, I mean, saying this to a young person's hard, but like there's a lot of things that I miss about being younger, where there's that curiosity that you have, that there's this desire to try things. And I think like, I would always say like to people, like, just give Jesus a try, like just try.
Yeah.
Because I think there's that, like once you lean in, like your life can change. So that would be my like one piece of advice, would just be like, don't box God, don't limit God. Like, and your relationship with God is your relationship with God. It doesn't have to look like this person or that person. Like, and that was really encouraging for me. Like I felt like the people around me in church, as soon as I started going, I never felt like it had to look a certain way. And I think when you believe that, then of course sometimes God can seem scary, because you're like, oh, I don't know how that person prays like this, or when they pray, they say this, do I have to say that? And I think like once you take those kinds of restrictions off it, then you begin to actually know Jesus for yourself.
That's great.
Yeah.
We kind of know you now. So we've coming to you at the end of, not the end of the journey, because
it's the end.
It's not the end. It's not the end. It's still the beginning. To some extent.
The end.
But so it's cool to hear a little bit of you kind of experiencing church for the first time, experiencing worship for the first time. I find it so fascinating that you both grew up with like Catholic heritage and then suddenly encountered God at Hillsong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That is crazy. We didn't talk about that before.
No, we didn't. But that's awesome. But you said this phrase when you were like talking about you experiencing worship was, I had to be involved. Like, oh, I had to I had to give something to this. This feels like almost like a calling or a purpose or a desire that was being birthed in you.
Yeah.
And now we flash back 12 years? No, 20 years since then, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much more than 20 years. Yeah.
20 years. And we know that you've just like released a new album, pretty much. Like you've done some worship stuff. But I'd love to hear the beginning, how you got into it, like, and what that looks like. Because I know we obviously know who you are, and we've heard your voice, and we've sung your songs. But like, for anyone who's listening who doesn't know who you are, what you then got involved with, what was what was it? What happened after?
And I think it's interesting because you didn't grow up with like a musical background, for what I'm gathering. Like you're like, oh, I'm into sports. Like I'm doing my thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, now you write music. It's like, how did that happen?
I know. Yeah. I mean, it's really, looking back now, it's actually crazy because it definitely felt like a collision at that point in my life. It was like a complete redirection. Like getting to know God took me on this wild journey that, you know, if I speak to my parents, like I'd ask even though I was back home in Sydney for Christmas, and we were just reminiscing with like the family, all the boys together, and which I was like, oh, you know, what did my brother Brennan, like, what did he want to be when he was older? And like, what did I want to be? My parents never said, like, I never talked about music. I never talked about church. Because I just think like when you meet God, it's like, he just takes you on this roller coaster journey. And I think that's the funnest part about following Jesus. But for me, it was like, I'd met Jesus, and encountered his Holy Spirit, which I know now, in a worship service. And I was just like, like I had to be a part of it. That kind of started this journey of like, okay, like what worship did for me, I want to be a part of that for other people. And so I was like, okay, I need to learn to play guitar. So I would like watch YouTube, and YouTube like was so janky at that point. I would like learn to play guitar. And then I was at high school. I had a bunch of friends who played music who weren't Christians. Well, yeah, they were, but not, you know, everyone knew who Jesus was, but I was like, hey, like one of my friends, Tom Kennedy, was like in the band at school. I was like, hey, like, dude, you need to teach me how to play guitar. And I'm like, can you teach me how to play these songs? And I'd give him like chords for like Hillsong United songs at the time. Okay. I was like, can you listen to this and teach me how to play it? And he's like, this song's cool. And I was like, yeah, it is, right? He's like, yeah. So then he would teach me how to play. And then my friend, like, I had another friend called Elliot, and he'd play drums, and we all started just playing these songs together. And all of a sudden they started coming to church.
Wow.
They all got saved.
That's crazy.
It was all through worship. And I think that's always been this point in my life. I feel like so much can change in worship. Anyways, we started a band together, these boys like from school, and we would write like worship songs. And then eventually that would change. We started playing in like the foyer or lobby at church. And then eventually, towards the end of high school, you know, the youth group like would be like, hey, like, do you guys want to come and play? And like, why don't you play like a song in the service? And we're like, okay. And so we'd start playing songs. And then that kind of transpired into like, you know, the pastors and leaders there were like, hey, like I'm speaking on this topic on Friday. Aiden, do you think you could write a song to go with the sermon? I'm like, okay. Like it just all happened in this weird, like I never felt qualified at any point. I never felt ready. I look back now and it's like, it all makes sense. But at the time I was like, I don't know how to write a song. I was so nervous. I still get so nervous. But back then I was like, you know, if someone asked me to sing on a Friday night, everything else was out the window that week. I was just like the whole week thinking about that. So anyways, that's kind of started. I started writing. And then towards the end of high school, just as I was finishing high school, I started leading worship pretty much at the youth group and went to university. Sorry, I'm giving you all dot points.
No,
went to university. Because I never ever thought that, you know, I would end up making worship music and being in ministry. Like that was never my goal. I always was like, I love volunteering at church. I love being involved. But, you know, I never thought that this could be what my life would look like. So I went to university, I studied marketing. And then probably in my last year of studying at university, the youth pastors at the time at Hillsong, Laura and Peter Toggs, were like, hey, like, you know, there was like this natural, everyone was kind of writing in the youth group. They were like, hey, like maybe we should just like start getting together with the guys and maybe we can like put a record together or something. And we were like, okay. None of us knew what we were doing. And we started writing. And then, you know, that was over a 6-month period. And then we had like a summer camp. And it's like, hey, let's just record these songs that we wrote. And I was very much like, I was working in a kitchen. I was like just about to finish university. I was like, about to go into work. And we recorded this album, which was then which became Young and Free, the band at the time. And then, but none of us had any expectations for it. Like a bunch of the guys in the band were in other bands. Some people were school teachers. And it kind of just like overnight kind of just, I guess in a lot of ways like blew up, I guess. But just, there was no expectation for that. We had recorded and written these songs just so that our youth group could sing them. And we're like, let's give them these CDs at youth groups so that they can learn them. We can sing them every Friday. But, you know, it kind of just overnight went everywhere.
Wow.
And it kind of, within a couple of weeks, we're in the States and we're traveling. And that was pretty much for the next 10 years, my life. Like we were on the road almost 200 days a year. And no one in the band or group ever imagined that would be what our life looked like. And I think that's just a testimony to God, like following God. It's just this wild adventure.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was the longest.
No, that was.
I had to get through it all.
No, I love it.
Brilliant.
There's so much, and I think
there is.
Yeah, there's just a lot. I think what you were talking about, how like, oh yeah, just this kid like kind of stumbled into church, kind of found my feet, and then I guess like the music like kind of gripped me. So I just wanted to like lead people in that moment. And like I think a lot of your story is just you just saying yes to God. And I think sometimes when we think about, you know, the bigger picture of our lives, the future, like after university, then getting your job, then getting married, then doing all these things, sometimes it can seem like, whoa, that's a lot. Like, God, I don't even know what that looks like. And I think if God was to give us the whole picture, I think we'd all run away and be like, "Bro, this is too much." But he gives us like just the next step or like just that little crumb to like lead you. Like he doesn't give us the whole map because we can't handle the whole map, but he'll give us the one step and be like, "Will you take it?" And I feel like with your story, not in like in a heavy intentional way, but it was like, oh, I felt like God was moving me here, so I just walked over here. Then it's like, oh, like as my pastors were asking me to write, okay, so I moved over here. Then it's like, oh, we kind of got together and started writing music, so then we moved over here. But it was never like a forceful thing. It was a flow. It was more like just being led by God naturally. And it sounds like it was quite effortless. And I like that. I like how God's like, he doesn't put pressure on us and he doesn't force us, but he very much like leads us by the hand and is like, just follow me. And it's like very chill. And then you look back and you're like, girl, how did I even get here? And all you were doing was just following his hands. That's all you can do, really. So I really like that in your story.
And I think like I fully agree with that. It feels like this little like river, like this thing that you just like are flowing down. But I do feel like, you know, the church was such a pivotal thing for me, like, because I think saying yes to God 100% was real. Like, but I think being in a community of people who like were encouraging me, like I had no musical, like I just think even just on a practical level, like I had no qualifications to be writing songs and singing. You know, at 16 years old, I was not, you know, quote unquote good enough. But I think like being in this environment where, you know, leaders and pastors and friends are encouraging you in these, they're seeing things in you that you can't see in yourself, like seeing what God is doing in you more than I could see it. Like that was why I'm here. Like, and that's why I got to do what I got to do and be a part of, is because people saw in me things that I didn't see in myself. And I think like, you know, I would say like for anyone like listening, like being a part of a community is like so pivotal. And I think it's so important. It's like, it's the reason why the Bible talks about that, like, you know, iron, like sharpens iron, like those kinds of things. Like it's like being around people who love Jesus, like-minded, is so important to like even just discovering what the calling on your life is. Because I know for a fact, like I could have met Jesus and been saved and it would have been amazing. But had I not been in that environment, I don't know where life would have taken me or where God would have taken me. I think there's so many things I said yes to because someone encouraged me to say yes to it. And that was God speaking through them. But I needed to hear it from a person because that's how I would. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
That's
Yeah.
great. So you've been around, right? You've
Yeah.
been touring 200 days a year for years, starting with this passion of I want to give people an experience that I encountered for myself. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's like an amazing calling. And then the combination of that and doing that through church and having the positives of that and the good things of what church brings, which is community that encourages us and pushes us out and believes in us even when we don't in ourselves. I think it's so practical already. Like, I know for me, I'm walking away like, wow, yeah, I do need to make sure I'm grounded in church. Wow, I'm so grateful for my church. Like, grateful for community. Like, it's already super practical. I guess in terms of like something I'd be really curious to hear from you, is your kind of now passion and calling towards worship, because you've seen a lot of it, and you've done it for years now. And I guess, do you still have this passion to do the same thing, which is have people encounter God in worship like you did? And maybe what do you see? This is another little side question, so there's kind of two. But like, what do you see an undercurrent of in worship, and the way that worship is? What way do you see worship going as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, to answer your first question, yeah, definitely. I still have the same passion. Like, I think it, and I think that's because like no moment in worship is the same. And I think the fun thing about following Jesus is kind of like anything can happen, and that constantly drives you. Like, well, what could God do today? What could God do in this service? What can God do through this song? And like, I think that's the funnest part, is like even just writing a song. Like, you can write a song that you think is amazing and it doesn't do what you thought, or you could write a song that you didn't think much of, but it happened easily, and then all of a sudden God's hands on it and it does something crazy. And I think that kind of never knowing is what is so like amazing about like God. So I've never lost that passion. I think for me, in fact, like I feel like, you know, I feel more passionate about it in a lot of ways. I think, you know, I've had a big couple of years. I've moved countries. I live in America now. I'm like, been there for 4 years, and I've gone through this journey of like, you know, discovering like who I am as a person and what I believe, and, you know, and the thing that's gotten me through all that has been like the presence of God. And like, so in a lot of ways I have this like excitement again, like for worship in a way that I almost feel similar to when I first met Jesus.
Wow.
So yes, I still feel passionate. I think an undercurrent in worship right now, it's a good question. I don't know. I feel like, and I've said this a lot, like I think young people particularly, are so, from what I can see, there's this like boldness in faith, like rising up now, that feels like even more tangible than ever before. There's like this, like, I don't know, even like what you guys do, like there's a boldness to what you guys do, like going out into the streets and talking to people about Jesus. Like some of those things I feel like, you know, have been I feel like people have been a lot more timid about their faith in the past. And that's not everybody, but I just feel like in terms of worship, it's like, okay, worship is just something that we do in church. And I think like what you guys have done is take God out into the streets, talk to people on the streets. And like, that would be something that in my younger self, I would have been so scared to do. You know, there was a fear in that, but I'm seeing in this generation a boldness to talk about Jesus, to sing about Jesus in public settings, like with no fear, just because like that, I think is kind of where worship is going, and where it is this like this unapologetic nature to singing about God, writing songs that are vertical songs that less about self, more about who God is and God's character. And that really, really excites me. I also feel like there's this other side of it that I also think is just as cool, where it's like even like the genre of worship is broadening, like what worship can sound like and what it can look like. is the broadest it's ever been. You've got like worship almost in all genres of music at the moment. Like if you look at like the worship like playlists and stuff and Christian playlists, like there's it sounds so different to what it sounded like 10 years ago. And I think that's really exciting. I think people are like leaning into like kind of what we were saying before, like God doesn't have to look like the church doesn't have to look like this. I think worship music is in this place right now where it's like it doesn't have to sound like this. It can look like this. I think obviously that's with social media too. Like that I've been really encouraged by that. I think it's really, really cool.
It's very interesting.
No, yeah, it is. And I just wanted to add on to that. Like, I think before, like it felt like, okay, we do this worship thing in church and then we go back to our normal lives. But I feel like we obviously want people to encounter God and we want people to hear about Jesus because Jesus is cool. Yeah, he's just cool. And I think like with the way like worship is like changing with like playlists and stuff, it's taking it out and it's bringing it to people that wouldn't normally like come to church on a Sunday. Like people that wouldn't feel drawn to like rock up to like a, I don't know, like a scary old church looking building. But like they can go on Apple Music and like find a worship song and then that can be like their entry, or like a praise song or a song that sounds like it would be on the radio or in the charts. No, that's actually worship. Like, wow, that's worship. That's so different. So like, it's really, I feel like the way it's going now, it's really trying to like we were talking about, not box God in, but also like redefine like what following Jesus looks like, or redefine like what worship music can look like. And I think that's more inviting.
Oh, 100%.
Feels more inviting. Yeah, I don't know. That's just what I was
it is
thinking.
very interesting. I mean, you're totally right. You go on the Christian playlists and the range of genre is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I have lots of questions that I want to go to personally as a musician. I'm like, what's the sound that's about to erupt and all this kind of stuff. But what I think could be really helpful is talking about calling a little bit.
Great.
Because I think when, you know, a lot of our audience will be probably teens or 20s. And calling can be quite an overwhelming thing. I know even I feel like I question my calling every couple months. I'm like, oh, am I on the wrong track? Like I look on Instagram and they're doing better than me. Am I meant to be doing that? Like some 2-year-old is already better at bass than me. Like what's going on? And like, you know, it's kind of, it's easy to question yourself and question your calling and this general narrative of anything's possible, which we've seen, like, and I think you're a testimony of like things just happened, and it was awesome, and God breathed on it, and you saw loads and loads of stories of God moving, and it's possible to be a Christian rock star. Who knew? Like, great, anything's possible, and I guess for those who are struggling to figure out calling, struggling to make a choice, struggling to know what God's speaking to them, what would you encourage us with, like or like advise us in? I know it's quite broad, but
no, I think like going back to what we said before, I think being in a community is the first step. I think well, seeking God is the first step, asking God and praying about it. Like, I feel like I remember doing that, like, especially as a young person, like, just like, honestly, just being like, God, like, help me, those types of prayers, like, help me know what to do. But for me, that was also pretty, I felt like there was just a lot of, like what you said, like, I think just saying yes, like, that was the start of it. Just saying yes to the doors that were opening, and not trying to, like, see the end goal. Like, I think, you know, I very much like, particularly if you start putting like these parameters on your life, being like, no, but I want to be this, so I have to do all these things. I think like if doors are opening in front of you, like, I think just walk through them when they come to the things of God. But so I'd say that I think getting in community and talking about these things with people, I think for me, like, that was a huge thing. Like, I would talk, like, in the way that we're talking about it now, like, I would be talking to like the pastors at church or the leaders. Like, we had small groups, and like in those groups we were encouraged to talk about like what we've been praying about, what we've been thinking about. And it was in those times that like I was encouraged. And I think it's good for people around you to know what it is first that's stirring in you, but also like maybe you, as you're a young person, you're like, I know that I want to be in ministry. I know that I want to preach. There are a lot of people that know those things, and it's like, okay, well then talk about that with the people around you and let them encourage you in it. And then as well, like they'll help push you in that way. I also think like calling doesn't need to be as specific as one kind of job or role. I think like our calling really starts with like just being called to firstly, like, you know, lead people to Jesus and love Jesus. Like those things are like at the core of what our calling is. And so that can be done in so many ways. And I think don't close yourself off to that. I think sometimes we get scared, like it could be you're at youth group and it's like, hey, can you come help stack the chairs? And it's like, well, no, I don't do that because I'm a worship leader. It's like, no, like all of these things are like what we're called to do. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's those would be the main things I'd encourage people in. Like it's kind of comes back to the same thing. Like just don't box God, like be open, say yes.
Yeah.
And over time you'll discover like what it is that, you know, and also like God like knows the desires of our hearts. So there's obviously things in all of us that like we hope and wish for. And I think like we have to trust that God will bring those things, you know, to completion.
Yeah.
No, it's brilliant. I mean, it's so easy to do what you just said, like disqualify our primary calling, which is just to know God and be known by God.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, no, that's it.
Yeah.
And out of that, there's more. Oh yeah, no, so that's really helpful. That's really
and I also
cool.
feel like you feel like doing that actually fulfills you. Does that make sense? Like it's like whether it's, you know, you might be like, oh, I want to be a rock star or whatever, I don't know, or I want to be a banker. And it's like, but actually doing that thing, like being known, like knowing God and being known by God, like can be the thing that fulfills you even more than that being a banker.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
For our generation, like obviously social media is like a really big thing, and like you can almost get caught up in like what you were saying, like the comparison part of like, oh, I see this person's doing that or that person's doing that, or oh, they're writing these songs, or oh, they're training for that. Like I don't know what it is, but like, oh, everybody's doing all that. What am I doing? Like God. And I think like as we were talking, like I felt the Holy Spirit was telling me like, no, actually comparison builds questions, but focus builds faith, in a sense of like, comparison and comparing yourself to other people, all it will do is just breed questions of like, am I enough? Like, God, will you ever use me? Like, oh, I guess my time has passed and all this stuff. But actually, like you were saying, like it's the focusing on Jesus as the primary thing. Like the more we focus on Jesus, actually the only thing that can build up is faith. And you not only have faith in God and who he is, but also faith to believe that he'll lead you somewhere great. You know, the Bible says that God has good things for us. Like Psalms 23, he leads me to green pastures. Like God always wants to lead us to good. You know, he's a good father. And I think sometimes when we like get into those moments of like, am I called to this? I don't really see, oh, I see this person doing that, I'm not doing it. Like allow God to lead you to good things. You know, and like don't question where he's leading you, because ultimately he will lead you somewhere better than you could ever lead yourself. You know,
that's really good.
That's what I was thinking.
I feel like I'm getting some heavy revolutions, like
heavy
revelations.
That's funny. Like I Instagram thing's funny and like social media, because I think when I discovered kind of the things of God for my life, those social media wasn't so much a thing. And so I didn't have, like, I was in church, felt this prompting, and I could listen to it because I wasn't distracted by the other million things that I could be doing. So I definitely feel like for people now, I think that is so hard, particularly when you're trying to discover who you are and what you're about. Like I found myself doing things I don't want to do, like getting up and going for early morning runs because everyone on Instagram is doing it. You know, like like I'm like, should I be doing that? Like looking at my phone in the morning and being like, oh my gosh, this person was at the gym 2 hours ago and it's 8 a.m. right now. And
Am I
like,
behind?
I need to go to
I'm
the
slacking.
No,
yeah. And I think like sometimes that's encouraging, but I think for a lot of the time it's just a distraction.
Yeah.
You know, and we find ourselves going,
Interesting.
well, like everyone else does that, so maybe I should be doing that. I feel for people right now. That's hard.
Yeah. I've just got this phrase that keeps coming back, which is stillness is productive. Just keep, I don't, like as we're talking, as we're thinking, and I'm like realizing for myself, oh man, I'm filling my diary with other things that I'm calling my calling and forgetting my primary calling, which is to love God, to know God and be known by God. And I think sometimes sitting with God, because there's not always clear moments of like encounter, can feel like a waste of time. Yeah. And can feel like, oh, I need my quiet time in the morning so that fuels my purpose in life, which is to do ministry or to bring the gospel in when I'm a banker. And like I need my quiet time because that fuels the rest of my life. Yeah. And we forget that the quiet time is the life. We forget that the quiet time is
the best part.
Is the calling, is the thing that is the thing. You know, that is it. Yeah. And I think that narrative of stillness is productive. Like that needs to be one that we adopt, because as you look on your phone and everyone's doing something, it just feeds into this other narrative that we have to do all the time. We have to fill our diaries. We have to be making sure that we are hanging out with the community and doing this and doing this and doing this. But man, just
stillness is productive.
Stillness. Hey,
I really like that.
Sip. Oh, stillness is I like that.
Yeah, you like it?
Hey.
Yeah, let's keep that.
Your brain is just wired that way.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sip.
Should we make them blue and like a greenish font?
Yeah.
Sip. Yeah, great.
That's so cool. I love how you just did that. But
I
feel
don't know
like
if that's that cool.
No, that was actually cool to me. I'm so sorry.
Sip.
You know what? Randomly, I just wanted to ask you a question about some of the worship songs that you've been on or like written in, and some lyrics. Like, there's this one song, Manny, if you're listening, this is for you, mate. I'm doing this for you. But you know the song "Let Go"?
Yeah.
Can you explain, maybe you don't have the answers to what it means broadly, but like for you specifically, when it says I close my eyes and colors fly, what does that mean? Yeah. I have been trying to figure out, Manny and I have been
what do you think? But what do you think that it means?
I don't know what that means. Does that mean like I close my eyes and like I'm just seeing stuff, or like I close my eyes and literally like am I tripping, or is like
about to faint?
Do I need to drink some water because I'm seeing colours flying? I don't know if that's healthy. What does that mean?
Super dehydrated.
It's just like it's raps for me. I don't know, I just wanted to ask that.
That's good.
Random question.
It's a good question. I mean, I'm happy to pump out these questions for me. So a lot of the songs that with Young and Free, like a lot of the songs that we wrote were very much like trying to teach young people like how to worship. So there's another song called Pursue that we wrote, which was like, I close my eyes to see my King in majesty. So kind of what you're saying, it's like this this focus on God. So close your eyes to see my King in majesty. Like teaching young people like how to worship. So close your eyes, like think of God. So I think with Let Go, like that like line, to be honest, was kind of like a theme. This idea of just like when we focus on God, like black and white turns to color. Like that was kind of the way that I imagined that lyric to make sense. If that makes
so sick.
That works, like. What is it? I close my eyes, colors fly.
There's no
hiding from. Yeah, the idea that you can't get away from God as well. It's like even when I close my eyes, you're there. The colors are flying around.
Wow,
that was the vibe.
Clip that and send that to my group chat, please. That's crazy.
All right, what else?
What are the songs to
any other
question?
Theological questions?
Did that one go through the barrier of?
Well, it got past Robert and Amanda. So Robert and Amanda Ferguson, who are the teaching pastors at Hillsong, were the people that would approve all our songs. We were talking about this before, but they were very thorough. Like getting a song, like we would have this thing, like all the songwriters at church who were submitting songs, it'd be like, if you could get a song through with no changes from them, it was like, you were unbelievable. But it never happened.
No.
Every time you'd send a song to Robert and Amanda, they'd be like, what do you mean by this? What does it? So Colors Fly, I Close My Eyes and Colors Fly got through.
Okay, that's good.
Them. So
were you allowed to sing Reckless Love? I feel like that was a big question.
That was a big question. Were we allowed to sing it?
Is God's love reckless? The
Hello.
You know, it's reckless in ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess so.
He gives it away without maybe getting it back sometimes.
That's
Oh.
true. Hey,
That feels reckless.
Hey.
man,
It's like me pouring this water out. That's reckless.
that is pretty reckless.
Yeah.
We're
Quite
on
rude.
Team Corey.
Yeah,
Hashtag.
yeah. We sung that song.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
No,
did.
we weren't allowed to.
Oh, really?
In our church, it was like God's
Naughty.
love is not reckless.
Yeah.
It is thought through and planned and perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, no, I was just
Yeah.
curious.
Okay.
Yeah,
You know.
just wanted to throw that in there. No, I just wanted to ask that. I guess kind of maybe what else we could touch on, like with your album Beyond Us,
Mhm.
but like I guess kind of like going from making worship music in a collective with
Mhm.
like other people to like doing more of like a solo project.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, there was something you said about before about community.
Yep.
And how like when you're in community, sometimes God can like use people to like encourage you or draw out things or be like, hey, you're really good at that, or hey, why don't you try that?
Yep.
And like going from like being a collective to almost like being an artist, making a project and allowing other people to hop on, like you're fostering that sense of community. Like when I look at albums and I see like other artists on, I'm like, oh, this is like a community piece, even though people might not see it that way.
Yeah.
But I guess like for you now, like how has, I guess, your sense of community with like worship music changed now that you like, you've got your own album and like you're doing things more solo? Like how has that changed for you?
It hasn't changed. Like the idea of community is still as important to me as ever. And I think that's also just because I have like this, I'm also super insecure too. So I love having people around me, and like the idea of doing something completely on my own is one of the scariest thoughts ever. Like I just love the idea of collaboration. Like I need collaboration. I'm so aware of my flaws and so aware of my like shortcomings that I need like others to fill it in, if that makes sense. So doing the solo record for me was never an idea in my head ever. I never thought about doing that. In fact, like if you'd asked me 5 years, 6 years ago, I would never have I would be like, no way. I think that, you know, with Young and Free, there was this element, and, you know, all the writing at Hillsong, like we were writing songs for the church and for our church, specifically our youth group. And so, you know, I go back to thinking about writing Young and Free records. We were so ingrained in our youth group, like, okay, what's going on in young people at that point?
Yeah.
What are the topics and things that young people are dealing with? And so, and I was older, I was in, you know, my early 20s, and what is a 15, 16-year-old going through? They're not things that I'm going through so much, but what are they going through? So we'd write songs thinking about that.
Yeah.
And I think I got to a point where I was like, well, there's things that God's doing specifically in my life. And I want to sing about those things. And Young and Free wasn't the context for that. And so it became just more obvious to me. I'm like, okay, there's things that I want to say about God and things that God's done in my life that I actually just need to put out there. And so that's why I went on the journey of doing my own project. But I knew I didn't want to do it alone, you know? And so like the record's not called like Beyond Me, it's like Beyond Us, because I wanted it to feel like I wanted to bring all my friends involved. So everyone who's on the record is all of my friends. Like I made the record with a lot of people that I make Young and Free records with, and then brought as many collaborations in as possible, because I kind of just wanted it to feel like this like family project in a lot of ways.
I love that.
No, well, we're all blessed by you stepping out, mate. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I guess kind of coming to a bit of a close. Feels like we've hit so much, and feels like there's so much more. we could sit here until 4 p.m. probably and just enjoy.
You could.
Let's do it.
Should no jokes. But I guess I know we've already kind of gone practical intentionally, but I'd love to go there again.
Yeah.
In terms of just some advice for like people who do feel passionate about music. Yeah. Like how does a 14-year-old who thinks that music is the calling, or a 20-year-old who thinks that music is like, that's me. I'm like, I love music. Yeah. Like how do we navigate that with God well? Yeah. And I know we've kind of said it already, but just in more language and more. Yep.
I just think number one was like, just don't isolate yourself in the process. Like
it's good.
The biggest thing for me has been collaboration. So if you're if you wanted to be a songwriter, I think like getting around people that have written songs
Mm.
is important. Like put yourself out there. When I was when I was starting out, I remember like sending emails, which goes against everything that I imagine now. But like I remember writing a song, horrendous songs, and sending them to like Joel Houston, who is like running Hillsong United.
Yeah.
Like, because my leaders were like, why don't you just email it to like Joel? I'm like, okay. And like,
Sure.
or like, and just being like bold, like taking the approach of like, I want to learn. I think that's really,
Great.
really like important. Like I would go up to like a lot of the older like songwriters and be like, hey, can you like help me? Like it always take that posture, especially when you're young, like just being like, hey, I've got so much to learn. Like, can you teach me? And I think like if someone came up to me and asked that now, like I love the idea of that. Like that is like, because it helps me too. So I think that's one thing, like actually just put yourself out there, ask people for help if you want to write songs, if you want to be involved.
It's great.
I think co-writing is the best thing ever because you could discover in that period too, like what you're good at, what your strengths are. For me, like mine was always melodies. So I wanted to get around people that were amazing at lyrics and then, yeah. So my advice would be like, discover that, figure out what it is that what you're passionate about. And you can do that with people in collaboration. And the other part we touched on multiple times is definitely just being in the community, being in a church, being in a place that encourages you.
It's good.
Practice. I actually think now is the best time in the world ever to be a musician or in music. Because of social media. Like on one hand, it's so hard because of the comparison part, but the other part is like you can just put it out there. Like you can sing song, like that never existed. Like the idea of ever having a song go viral, that never happened when like even going back 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that just did not exist. So I think like that's also a great way. Like that's maybe the modern way of like putting yourself out there or showing people your music is like bring them on the journey on socials and
That's great.
yeah.
That's really
Well, what is it that for you? Sorry, I'm interviewing you now.
Yeah,
but
no,
like
go
ahead.
what are the things that you feel like people struggle with or how do they like what are people longing for at that point?
I think it's probably I think it is the thing of like everything is available, right? As you said, like the idea of a song going viral is quite a new one. And I think it's finding a purity in motive
That's great.
and trying to make sure that you're doing the right thing for God. I think is actually the thing that stresses people out.
Yeah.
Because also you've got this flip side of things, which is I can see that this is available and it looks really cool. I want to do that.
Yeah.
And then there's this, and sometimes that is actually a wrong reason. And but also it can be a right reason. And so it's kind of there's this new like wrong way of wanting to be an artist or wanting the fame, which is also now available.
Yeah.
And so I think people are really scared of getting it wrong.
Yeah.
And when trying to do it right, I think that's probably what most people feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ask because you want to speak?
Well, I
into
think
that?
like, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I think what's wild about it, particularly in the worship space, is that you just can't, you could write the perfect song, the perfect formula, perfect structure, but you have no control on what God does with it.
Yeah.
And God puts his hand on things that you can't explain.
Yeah.
And so, I think that is both that's the hardest thing to reconcile, but also the best thing because it kind of just takes it out of your control. It's like, well, all I can do is what I can do.
Yeah.
And so, particularly if the motives are pure and like, hey, I just want to worship God, which I think honestly, most people, that is their motive. Like you pick up a guitar and you go through all of that, or you write songs or you sing because it's a gift that God's given you and that's like, I think that for most people is the motivation.
Yeah.
And I think God blesses that in ways that are different every time. So I think that's like makes it easier. But I also think for like anyone who's listening, it's like, it's also a hard road. Like you've got to work hard and it's not easy. And like I think the people that really desire it for the right reasons, are willing to go through that and put in their 10,000 hours or whatever it is, because they've called to it. And I think if you're in it for the wrong reasons, then I think very quickly you won't last.
Interesting.
That makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
That's not to be a discouragement, but I just think like generally, I think that's just how it works.
And it's good. It's an invitation as well to re-ask God.
Yeah.
Oh God, I thought this was it, but I'm like tired here.
Yeah.
I don't have the motivation for this.
Yeah.
Is this actually what you're calling me to?
Yeah.
No, it's great. It's really cool. Is there any final places we want to go whilst we got the wonderful Aodhán in front of us?
No, I just had a couple thoughts, but I don't want to long out this podcast. I don't know if I
do it. Go.
should jump in.
Yeah.
Should I jump in?
One or two.
I was going to say, like, with what you were talking about, like some of the hardest things, I think, well, I'm not an artist, I'm not a musician. So, you know, take it with a pinch of salt, everybody. Just fit my 2 pence in.
Well, maybe.
I think, don't box
Is
God
this
in.
the year?
You never know.
Well, I could do anything.
Imagine I
Send you
just come out
James.
with an EP this year. I'm just like, hey
Holy
guys.
smokes.
Yeah.
It's so random, but like, hey, I got an EP.
It's just a diss track on the way. Like me. It's like, that Jesse guy, he sucks.
No, I
hopefully
wouldn't.
not.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that.
We're not dating.
Yeah, I'd say that. No, I think
Clearly,
Yeah.
the distance of you guys on
No,
the
there's
couch could be further.
space for Jesus.
Like
I'm
you
standing
could
over
not.
there,
Space
mate.
for Jesus. Oh.
We have a laugh sometimes. It's great. I was gonna say, like, with the thing about social media and stuff, I think, like, not even just for music, but just creatives in general, when we make stuff, we want it to like be the best that it can be.
Yeah.
So if I'm gonna put out, like, if you're an editor, like if I'm gonna edit something, I want to put out the final version of this thing, like the best of the best that it can be.
Yeah.
And I
sure.
think we almost lose an element of vulnerability when we do that. And I think we almost lose out on letting people into the story and letting people into the journey. And I think that's what Jesus was all about. Like,
so good.
you see, like, Jesus and the woman at the well, and she like goes and she tells everybody, like, she's like the first person to tell a testimony. Like, that's kind of crazy. But she tells people about her story of how she met Jesus. Then you see, like, Jesus speaks in parables. He tells stories, like letting people into a journey and a narrative. I think there's something about that I think people can really peek in and see God when things aren't necessarily like the best version of it. Like, just put it out there. Like, at whatever stage it's at, if it's rough, put it out. Like, if it's ready, then put it out. If you're just coming up with ideas, put it out there, because somebody
100%.
can connect with that and God can use it. Like, sometimes we don't want to put out the rubble, but actually, like, God can use that.
So true.
So that's just what I was thinking as you guys were speaking.
Well, I think of the moments of big worship songs.
Yeah.
Like I was at an event yesterday with Tim Hughes.
I
and
loved him. Yeah.
You know, what a champion. And he sung his classic, Light of the World, Here I Am to Worship.
Yeah.
come on.
Oh, gosh, that song. So
And that
good.
was not polished when he did it. I think he was 16 when he
Yeah.
wrote it. He
Yeah.
just
Wow.
did 4 chords, tried it on a Sunday. And now it's like, Here I Am to Worship is a song that's known all around the world. And then you had like Graham
Yeah.
Kendrick pop up and do his Shine Jesus Shine. And
Oh, classic.
he said later, he was like, oh yeah, all these songs are like from my early days. I did these
Yeah.
and I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
And it's like, it just shows that actually the process, the rough and ready,
Mm-hmm.
it's God who just chooses to breathe on things.
Oh,
and that's so
100%.
encouraging, particularly in a world that's polished like on
Yes.
social
Yeah.
media.
I actually think that's like the biggest takeaway. That part, what you're saying, is I think is so important for people to understand. Is like the vulnerability, and particularly songwriting, is what connects with people, and that vulnerability often is not polished, or if not ever. And like, I even think back to like a lot of them, like my favorite songs that I've written are the ones that I wrote, like, particularly when I was young. I didn't know what I was doing, when there was no rules, I didn't understand structures of songs. I just wrote what I felt, and they're still the songs that I connect to the most in a lot of ways. And I think, like, yeah, what you're saying is so true in so many things. Like, there's so many worship songs that we know today that were just off the cuff moments in a worship set where people just started singing because that's what God was doing right in that moment, and they didn't think anything of it, and they've gone on to reach the world and as songs now that we sing all the time. So yeah, I think that's really encouraging for young people. Just put it out there, like, just whatever it is, let people in on the journey. And
That's vulnerable.
yeah, really, really cool.
That's scary as well.
Takes the pressure off. I think perfection is honestly the killer of any, like when you try to write these perfect songs, when it needs to be like the best thing ever, you honestly just cut the legs of it from the get-go, I think.
Facts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
And I feel like with us, like, as you said, trying to let people into their journey.
Yeah.
I feel like we got to let people into your journey on this podcast.
What a segue.
There it is.
Got him.
There she is.
I'm here. I did that. That was kind of cool. But yeah, we tried to.
Do you want to do it again? Because it was so good.
Go on, round 2. We're desperate for it.
Yeah, so on this podcast we're talking about no, I'm joking. But honestly, Aodhán, thank you so much for
thank you.
hopping on the podcast. So many
for
gems
having
were
me.
dropped. This was very good. It was
Thank
very
you. It was
fun.
great. You guys are awesome. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you. And thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. Maybe send it to a friend. Maybe there was something in there that you thought, oh no, I feel like somebody could really like benefit from listening. Maybe send it to a friend and leave us a comment if you're watching on YouTube. Let us know like what part stood out to you or like anything that you feel like God was stirring in you. Like we'd love to hear what you have to say. But yeah, we'll be back, I guess, next week with another episode, or this week whenever this comes out. I don't really know. But you just kind of have to figure it out.
Stay tuned and be subscribed.
Subscribe, like all the things. But yeah, thank you guys for watching and listening, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.